country needs nurses, facts. But unfortunately, the country will not compensate nurses for what they truly deserve because you're overworked and you're underpaid. Why would anybody stay in a job where they're overworked and underpaid? Just look at things now. You're deluding yourself to think that things are going to change. Things are not going to change. Things are not going to change. Like, if anything, things are going to get worse. Things are going to get worse. You know, there's enough. You've seen enough. We've been around enough to see that we can't wait for the government to do things in our favor. Life doesn't work like that. So this means that you now have to take things into your own hands. Listen, if you're an NHS nurse, you know that your job is one of the most important jobs this country needs. However, unfortunately, it's not the most financially rewarding job. And when I made that video on TikTok, I had a lot of people message me, similar to the one about footballers, but I had way more people reach out to me. And you know, the general consensus, and to be honest, I knew it. And really and truly, a lot of people who are nurses need to make more money. The country needs nurses, facts. But unfortunately, the country will not compensate nurses for what they truly deserve. And it'll be very unfortunate for people who are nurses to continue to wait for the government to step in, you know, and give them what they truly deserve, you know. And that's why I made that video. I made that video to really highlight to people who are working at NHS that you need to now take matters into your own hands. Now, a lot of people could say, you know, riots, petitions and things like that. But if you actually look at that, so many people do things like that. But does it actually make a difference? I guess only you will know that. But what I do firmly believe is that you need to create another side hustle for yourself. I firmly believe that. And in all honesty, to be honest, I feel like every single job for people who want to make more money, the only way out is to create a side hustle for yourself. You cannot wait for your manager to promote you. You can't wait for a job vacancy to come up. Like, you can be hopping from job to job to job, but if you really want to take matters into your own hands, what you need to learn how to do is to create a side hustle. That is going to be the only way out. With the cost of living crisis, what we're in right now, a lot of people are struggling. I had so many people reach out to my DMs, so many people who are nurses reach out to my DMs, and they were saying, how can they do this? And in all honesty, again, personally, what works for me, again, I wasn't a nurse, I worked in a primary school, but what worked for me was a property strategy called rent to rent Airbnb. Now, I'm not saying you need to do that to have a side hustle, because that might not be your interest. You might not be interested in property. There are so many other ways that you can make money. For example, you might be good at hair, you know, and I understand that working in NHS, and the reason why I say this is because I have so many people working in NHS around me. I understand that the job can be super tiring, super demanding. And the last thing you may want to do is to spend your extra hours that you do have free doing something else. However, you need to understand that you haven't got a choice. If you want to make more money, you haven't got a choice. And believe it or not, the period of you grinding doesn't have to be forever. But there definitely has to be a period. Like, you can't skip that. There definitely has to be a period. For example, NHS staff who they do agency shifts. You know, some of them work night shifts, some of them work day shifts. So obviously there are different shift patterns. But regardless, you have time. There is time that you have. And if you really want to create more freedom for yourself, and really and truly everything comes down to freedom. The reason people work hard, the reason people make money, the reason people work extra shifts is because ultimately everybody wants freedom. However, the truth of the matter is not everybody can achieve freedom, because not everybody's going to do what it takes to get freedom. You know, but this video is specifically for the NHS. Well, to be honest, it can be applied to all roles, but the NHS. The first thing I would advise people, is find something that you do enjoy doing. As I said, the first example that I gave is hair. There are many people I know who like doing hair. Can you make that into a side business, the hair, where you are charging people to do the hair? Again, I'm not in the hair. I don't know the prices for hair. However, I do know people who do it as a business, and people who do make a lot of money as a business. There was a girl recently, I was watching her video. I think she's about 27, and she's making, I believe she's making about 65k a year from her hair business. I don't know. I think it's something crazy like 20k a month, actually. I don't think it's 65k a year. I think it's actually 20k a month, because she has her own salon and everything. But again, that's the point where she grew to a point where she has a salon. You got to think to yourself, what can you do as a side hustle? And to be honest, a lot of people who work at NHS, they're more gifted than they realize. There's probably a skill that they have that they just need to know how to monetize. And that's all it is. When you can add value in something, you can monetize it. The reason why people don't get paid enough is because their perceived value is not enough. If your perceived value can be higher, you will be paid higher. For example, if you're in NHS and let's say you can teach something. If you can teach something, and you can teach something to a good level, All you need to now know is how to monetize it. Because believe it or not, there are people who would want your knowledge. They may not have they don't want to spend the time that you did. They don't want to make the mistakes that you did, but you can find a way to monetize that. And it doesn't have to be something crazy expensive. But the truth of the matter is, if you already have that skill, you already have that knowledge, that means that you have value. But the only problem is that you just don't know how to make money from that value. And if a lot of people who work in NHS realize that, the value that they have, and recognize the value that they have, then they will find a way for them to make more money. And this will also mean that they don't need to work as long hours. They don't need to go from morning shift to night shift to agency shift, bank shift. They don't need to do all of that, because they now have a side hustle which can actually complement their income, to the point where eventually they can reduce their hours. And I know this is what a lot of people who work in NHS would love to do. They would love to reduce their hours but still make the same amount of money or even more. That's what every single person wants. And the only way for you to really do that, you need to find a way to complement your income. But when you first start out, it is going to be difficult. I'm not going to lie to you. When I was working in a primary school and I was growing my business and I was trying to play semi-professional football, my time was strained. Like, I'll literally have to wake up an hour early to find landlords, then I'll go to work early in the morning. On my lunch breaks, I'll be calling landlords. After work, I'll be going to the gym or training in football. Then after that, I'll be going to networking events. So for me, and then when I come home, I was still doing stuff related to work. So for me, I didn't have crazy amount of time. And to be honest, you're not going to have a lot of time. But that's the whole purpose of sacrifice. And if you ever want to have freedom, you need to understand that it's going to come at a price. And unfortunately, it is your time. If you want to make more money, it is your time that is going to have to be sacrificed, But for a lot of people who want to get back their time, it's better you start now. It's better you start now rather than later, because eventually, as you get older, there'll be more and more things. And again, with the cost of living crisis, everything is going up. Everything is going up except from wages. Yeah. And if anybody is to actually just look at things now, you're deluding yourself to think that things are going to change. Things are not going to change. Things are not going to change. Like, if anything, things are going to get worse. Things are going to get worse. There's enough. You've seen enough. We've been around enough to see that we can't wait for the government to do things in our favor. Life doesn't work like that. So this means that you now have to take things into your own hands, and you need to start that side hustle. You need to find another way to generate more income. One thing I love about nurses, a lot of the nurses I know, and even to be a nurse in general, I believe you need a lot of discipline, you need a lot of patience, you need a lot of endurance. Even to be a nurse, it requires hard work. Those are all recipes for somebody who could be a very successful entrepreneur. Because really and truly, in order to be an entrepreneur, you need a lot of patience, you need a lot of endurance. You need all those traits are keys that you need to be successful as an entrepreneur, because it's not glamorous. Yeah, that when you work a shift, for example, somebody who works a 9 to 5, for example, I know not all shifts are like that, but let's say somebody who works a 9 to 5, that once it goes to 5 p.m, you can fully switch off. But as an entrepreneur, you need to understand that once you go for, especially when you're working full time, once you go from your 9 to 5, you are now going to go home, maybe eat, and then you're going to start working on your side hustle. So for a period, it's going to feel like you don't have a life. And I understand for the people who have dependents, it may not be as easy. But if you want to make it work, you have to sacrifice your time. For some people, it might just be the extra TV time that they have to wind down. You need to dedicate that to a business. There are so many businesses out there. Again, with AI, with ChatGPT, there are so many businesses out there. I would always say, look at something you're quite passionate about, because when it's something you're passionate about, it's easy for you to go through the difficult periods. Because again, business can be very difficult. So when it's something that you're passionate about, you're able to go through the difficult seasons and you're able to persevere because you generally enjoy what you're doing. I think I would always advise people, like, don't do something just for the money, because honestly, I'll probably do that in another video as well, but yeah, don't just do something for the money, because when it comes to the difficult periods and there's periods with no money, you will end up losing motivation. So it's very important for you to have a bigger why, and that's why when I said earlier about there is something that you're knowledgeable on and knowing how to sell your knowledge and monetize your knowledge, online product or something, or a hair service or something like that, if you're able to monetize that, that's better, because you're adding value to people. And I assume if you do hair, you enjoy doing hair. So again, that's one thing I'll say. So you already have the recipe to be a successful entrepreneur, but it's just knowledge. Knowledge is the biggest thing. I think the biggest reasons why many people stay in the exact same position year in, year out is because of a lack of knowledge. Financial freedom doesn't mean you have all the money in the world and this, that. Financial freedom doesn't mean quitting the NHS tomorrow. And I think that's what a lot of people need to understand. Starting a business doesn't mean that you're going to start today and you're going to be rich tomorrow. And I think anybody who says that is probably selling you a dream. You know, I think it definitely requires a lot of discipline. However, if you are willing to put in the work, if you're willing to put in the time, then financial freedom might just be you buying back your time, or you having to work less. For lots of people, that is life changing. You know, for a lot of people, especially with the cost of living, making extra £2,000 a month can be life changing. You know, so I think that should be the picture for, you know, some people, especially when you're starting out. You know, not necessarily the millions, but just the few £1,000s extra that you can make a month, because that would essentially allow you to buy back your time. I think it's important for me to actually get some stats, because as we know, stats are very important for people to actually understand the full picture. It says as of 2025, the NHS has over 40,000 nurse vacancies across England. 1 in 5 nurses say they're considering leaving due to workload and pay. The stats are there. As of 2025, over 40,000 nurse vacancies across England. Being a nurse is important. Being a nurse is essential for the UK, but more and more people are walking away from being a nurse. It makes sense. Why? Because you're overworked and you're underpaid. Why would anybody stay in a job where they're overworked and underpaid? And the road leads back to the same point that I said. You have to find a way to generate more income for yourself. There are so many ways. Lack of knowledge is no longer an excuse. Lack of knowledge in 2025 is no longer a reason, it's an excuse. Because with everything at our disposal, especially when you're in England, we're in the UK, there is so much at your disposal. There's ChatGPT, there's AI, which can give you some ideas. If you can't think of ideas, there are so many things that you can begin to think of, you know. And again, if you stay in the same position year in, year out, the only person to really blame is yourself. Because best believe there are so many people I know who've worked in the NHS and have actually built another side hustle outside of the NHS. There are people who've gone into property development whilst working NHS, whilst being a mother. There are people who've done that. You know, when you think your situation is difficult, believe it or not, there are people in your situation who've managed to turn it around. So at this point, you have to understand that it's not luck. You know, oftentimes people just give themselves excuses, and that excuse leads people to be in the same position. If you're working at NHS, my advice to you, generally from the bottom of my heart, is try and find another way to make money. Try and find a side hustle. Again, for me, obviously what works for me whilst I was working at primary school was me having a rent for an Airbnb business, but that is not for everyone. Try and find something that you genuinely enjoy and make it into a side hustle. It doesn't mean that, you know, again, you're going to be rich overnight, but it's a start, you know. And you already have the resilience being a nurse, you already have the patience being a nurse, you already have the tools to be a successful entrepreneur. But now it's just the knowledge, and obviously that part is down to you. Nobody's gonna come and give you the knowledge, you know. So yeah, anyway, I hope you found this video insightful. If you want me to do more videos like this, I might do more videos like this. Let me know in the comments. If people don't do that, if they then I won't, then this will be a one-off maybe. But yeah, honestly, generally, if you got to the end of the video, I appreciate you getting to the end of the video. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel, and also follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is _EZY property.